Our last presentation is from Geraldine Nolf, who is a product manager, metadata, and data, who comes from the metadata and data publication and team coach data management of Informatie Vlaanderen, and she's working on the implementation of spatial data infrastructure according to the ISO and other and ISA² directive, the ISO standardisation directive, and she's participated in various related groups. Geraldine, the floor is yours.
Can you hear me already?
Yes, perfectly.
Perfect. Hello, I'm Geraldine from Informatie Vlaanderen. Thank you for the introduction, and I'm glad to give already an update on what Danny has said and presented in the OGC paper, because now it's not only a pilot anymore, but we have all things already set in the beta surrounding and the beta environment. So GeoDCAT-AP in Flanders is really closing the gap between the two worlds of the geospatial data and the general open data. So Flanders is a very small region, if you know, in Belgium, but we have a lot of metadata standards, portals and systems, as you can see in this slide. So we thought we can do better and bring Mrs. World and Mr. Cube together and open up the data. How did we do that? We took the two worlds and the flows they are follow to describe the metadata into at which management system we do that and in which portal we visualize it. So for the geospatial data, it seems that we can still follow the same process. So you start at the ISO Inspire standard, and we have our own SDI Flanders best practices on top of that to make sure, for example, there are file identifiers filled in and more restrictive because of the visualization in the portal. Then everything is described in GeoNetwork as a system. It's an open source metadata management system, and you have the Geo Metadata ISO 19000 series as a profile to describe your information into, and you can export it via that XML to get it in the GEOPUNT portal. It's based on Sitecore and MapApp technology. On the other hand, we have the open data, and there is the flow that everybody describes more as a best practice, not really regulated in Flanders via DCAT-AP. And we configured in our analysis that you can do the description in the same GeoNetwork open source tooling. So therefore, we created an XML out of the DCAT-AP standard. And we can export it as well in the DCAT-AP RDF format to get harvested via that RDF into the SECAM surrounding for the Flemish Open Data Portal. And then bridging the gap for everything that is open geospatial, so the two worlds, you start at the niche description, ISO Inspire, in that profile in GeoNetwork, and then export it via the GeoDCAT-AP into the Flemish Open Data Portal. So it really helps bridging the gap. Therefore, we made a DCAT-AP plugin that was built into the GeoNetwork surrounding, but you have to upgrade for making it work into the version 3.4 or higher. So we follow the governance of GeoNetwork with the DCAT-AP plugin. And now I'm going a bit more in detail. So how is it possible? Because GeoNetwork is schema neutral, we can use a schema plugin for DCAT-AP, and we based on the version 1.1. It was developed by him and funded by our organization, Informatie Vlaanderen. And I would suggest that everybody can visit the beta environment or check the open source software. We made it available under the GPL version 2 license, so everybody is free to use it, to test it, and reuse it in your own GeoNetwork surroundings and make it even better than it is already, so feel free. What are the features of the DCAT-AP plugin? So as I said already, the XML schema, so that's necessary to get it into GeoNetwork, and because of the RDF syntax is not so structured, so via XML you can structure it properly and nest it a bit, have controlled vocabularies to link with, and use it in GeoNetwork. The second feature is the harvester. So every DCAT-AP RDF that is harvested has to be written and normalized from RDF into that XML schema, of course. Then there is an editor, so a customer of GeoNetwork can create, modify the metadata records. We use controlled vocabularies that are required by the DCAT-AP, but also some extras, like Antonio was saying, for example, for the licensing, we already have some sample licenses that they can use, and then it's more easy to filter on that ones, for example. So that is the fourth feature. It can be imported in the editing form as well. Then we have the multilinguality. So we use the standard foreseen functionalities of GeoNetwork for that. And the benefits are in the search, the view, and the editor modus. Then we have a validator, because we of course want that the editors are conform to DCAT-AP. So we created a validation like there is in the GeoNetwork surrounding for the geospatial data. We made an XSD schema for the DCAT-AP and some extra schematrons I will show later on. And then there is at the end the RDF endpoint, of course, because the DCAT-AP that is written in an XML format has to be exported again in RDF. And then in its turn, it can be harvested by CCAN portals or other portals to present it on open data portals. Some more detail about the several parts I just explained highly. So the XML is really a nested data structure, can be queried with XPath, and RDF is a graph-based data structure. So it is in different formats, it's more arbitrarily structured and can be queried with Sparkle. But we needed a DCAT RDF that was normalized, so therefore we created this figure. At the right side you can see the input formats, the DCAT RDF, and with Sparkle selection and an XSLT procedure we harvest it into DCAT XML, so we can put it into GeoNetwork at the left side of the figure. Here you see an example of the input formats, Turtle, RDF XML, N-Triple, or JSON LD is all possible to harvest from. Then you have the editor. So in the two examples, you can see the simple and advanced form for editing the DCAT-AP record. So it's very similar as you have for the geospatial world. You can see at taal NL and taal EN, so that's Dutch and English, that multilinguality is presented here. Then we use controlled vocabularies as thesauri, required by DCAT-AP, but also for the Flemish version we use some extras because of it would not be free text fields. And then you have the reuse of some typically GeoNetWORK existing controls with some modification, for example, on the spatial extent as you see in the figure below. Then the validator. There we have three schematron rule sets on top of the XSD schema. So really the 1.1 DCAT-AP mandatory rules and the recommendations. So that is required by the standard itself. But then we have an extra DCAT-AP Flemish rule set where we have some extra mandatory rules for publishing the Flemish open data. So there we have some extra prescriptions on, for example, fulfilling the publisher, a contact point, the licenses, or a title of the distribution, and some code lists we use. The endpoint then, so the export can be as DCAT-AP RDF, and therefore we use the GeoNetwork API. So now we start from the left side of the figure, DCAT-XML, so everybody has edited or it's harvested in GeoNetwork, and that is providing the DCAT-XML, and then we have the mapping via the RDF endpoint and XSLT procedures to DCAT RDF again, so that normal open data portals can pick them up. And that is supporting the W3C LDP paging and Hydra paging, and as output format we have RDF XML. So we still have room for improvements. The usability of the validator especially is one of the possibilities to improve, because if you have an error now in the validation mode, you cannot switch immediately to that exact element where your error is made. So the link with the fields we can do better. Harvesting with paging support is possible for improvement. The RDF endpoints, we should have multiple formats, not only RDF and XML. And the schema.org integration is not in place yet, so JSON LD on HTML pages, for example. But yeah, the real goal is moving towards one catalog, so that way you can see already there is one catalog for the geospatial world and the open data world. So both worlds are fitted together in one catalog that can be harvested. And then by having the good keywords and so on, you can search and filter on faceted searches as well. So that really is a benefit or an advantage. I have here two examples, one of the geospatial world at the left side, one of the typically open data world at the right side. So it's all in the same catalog. And the real goal for me and my colleagues is to come towards a reusable reference implementation and a harmonized strategy for the metadata catalogs. So this is the vision as you can see, and by closing the gap now already between the geographic and the general open government world, that's the first step. We prove it is possible, and we are certain that other data domains will follow. For example, we are now analyzing the data concerning natural persons and enterprises, so the typically closed data. Also the APIs, like already Andrea said, with the new DCAT-AP specification, is that too an option? But also statistic data like StatDCAT or archival information, maybe there's some ArcDCAT that has to be created as well. And the final goal is the scope of the information catalog. So that way you keep it simple to describe and publish for data providers their data with the once-only principle in mind and reaching the widest possible audience and being at the same time in line with all regulations applicable to their data domain. So I'll thank you for your attention. If you have further questions further than this webinar, you can reach us, Matthias, Dirk, or myself at this email addresses, and thank you for the information.
Yeah, thank you, Geraldine. And indeed, we have now quite a lot of time for questions. So one question specifically to Geraldine.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm first inviting the audience. I would have one of my own, but if somebody else has a question, please type in the chat box. Or while we give people time to think, let me start with my own. So what would be the added value to move from SECAN to GeoNetwork for the description of open data?
That's a good question. The fact that you have one metadata management system to maintain is the most useful way to describe it. You have one infrastructure, times the storage, and you keep it simple for the editors because one time they have to edit geospatial data, the other time they have to edit open data, and so if you have only one system to do it, that's more simple for them. Also, you bridge the gap, make it once only, and in SECAN we were not possible to have validation in there. So in the GeoNetwork surrounding the validation is really worked out well, and we created that for the DCAT-AP standards too. So it's more quality of metadata descriptions, and of course it's a big community after the GeoNetwork implementation. You have a lot of experts, so that's a good thing, certainly in evolving in governance, conform the standards from version 1.1 to version 2 and so on. So that really was our added value to do it.